Hey guys, Darren Sugiyama here, CEO and founder of Lionsmark Capital, the most transparent premium financing intermediary in the life insurance industry. So many of you know I'm a big fan of certain index universal life insurance policy designs. Not all of them, but some of them. And the way I came to these conclusions was from backtesting and stress testing virtually every IUL from every carrier and analyzing 121 different historical 40-year periods of S&P 500 performance. So a lot of so-called experts in the financial services industry have very strong opinions about certain IULs from certain carriers. And most of these guys, quite frankly, both the fans and the critics, don't have the ability to truly backtest these different product designs, incorporating, things like volatility, poor sequences of returns, multiplier bonuses, and additional asset-based charges that are used to double down on the options purchased through the investment banking firms. In fact, most of these guys wouldn't even understand what I just said. But in any case, there are some advisors and clients that feel more comfortable with a whole life product chassis, more so than an index product. And there's nothing wrong with this whatsoever. In fact, one of the benefits of whole life is that you already know what the guaranteed dividend credit is going to be in the year the client enters the product because the dividend credits were declared in the previous year. In addition, whole life has certain guarantees that IULs don't have. One of which is that a whole life policy, you're never going to get a 0% credit when the S&P has a negative return, in the way that you would in an IUL. Now, historically speaking, even if IUL's floor and cap proposition would net a much higher return than, say, whole life dividends, for certain clients, the steadier, less volatile historical dividend returns can be more appropriate, or at least more appealing from an emotional standpoint for certain clients. So, in today's webinar, I'm going to review a case study that shows premium financing Penn Mutual's Guaranteed Whole Life 2 product. This year's dividend credit for that product is 5.75% for the year 2023. And I'm also going to show a comparison between premium finance whole life and, quote unquote, doing nothing, and just keeping the funds in a non-insurance based investment account that would be subject to 40% in estate taxes. When you see the net value that will be passed on to Generation 2 after the estate taxes, I think you'll want to share this with all of your high net worth clients. One, because it's based on indisputable mathematical facts, and two, because this may be the first time you've ever seen premium finance whole life make sense in the midst of these high borrowing interest rates that we're in right now. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this webinar started. Okay, so today we're going to look at premium financing whole life, and we're going to evaluate Penn Mutual's Guaranteed Whole Life 2 product. Let's start out by looking at the premium financing ledger. So in this premium financing design, we're going to borrow $1.75 million in annual premium on a 10-pay. The client would make the interest payments out of pocket each year. They would also post collateral, and the collateral peaks out at 1.1 million in year 5, and that's based on a dividend credit expectation of 5.75%. We're showing a loan exit here in the 15th year of the policy. The death benefit hits a low point of just over $10.5 million in the year of payoff. And then we see the death benefit net of loans continue to grow in this policy. If we go all the way out to age 90, let's assume life expectancy is age 90, that death benefit net of loans increases up to just shy of $20.5 million. So if we look at column 15, again, return on investment for the first 10 years is really off the charts. After the loan payoff, some people might argue, well, 1.5%, 2.5%, 3% ROI is not a great return. I could do better in the market. Well, that may be true if we were just looking at gross returns. But remember, if they do nothing, if they do not do any sort of estate tax planning using any sort of life insurance, typically those portfolios are going to be inside their taxable estate subject to not only capital gains tax, but also to a 40% estate tax rate at their end of life when Generation 2 inherits the parent's estate. So let's take a look at what happens if the client invests the same amount that their interest expense is in the premium finance life insurance policy if they invested that same amount in a non-insurance based investment inside their taxable estate. First, we'll recap the premium financed life insurance solution here. The client would pay interest out of pocket each year in years 1 through 14. They would then pay off the loan using policy value in the form of a withdrawal in the 15th year of the policy. And so based on the interest rate assumptions that we showed, the client would be out of pocket $9.6 million in interest expense. The death benefit would hit a low point at $10.5 million, and that would be at age 69 in policy year 15, which is the same year of the third-party lender payoff. And the reason we're showing this is again, the low point death benefit net of loans. Under the assumption that life expectancy is age 90, at age 90, the death benefit net of loans would be just shy of $20.5 million. Now, this is under the assumption that the policy dividend credit was 5.75% constant all the way through. And of course, there are no capital gains tax due on the cash value growth nor the death benefit. And if this policy is owned outside the client's taxable estate in an ILIT or an irrevocable life insurance trust, the death benefit would not be subject to 40% in estate taxes. If we compare this to a standard taxable investment account that's inside the client's taxable estate, and if the amount of funds invested in this taxable investment account were the same as the interest expense in the premium finance policy, in this case, over the course of 14 years, the client would have contributed $9.6 million to this investment account. And so if we assume the same 5.75% gross return as we showed in the policy, and we assume only a 1% all-in investment fee, along with a capital gains tax rate of 32.3% and an estate tax rate of 40%, at age 69, where the policy hits a low point death benefit of $10.5 million, the after estate tax net value inherited by Generation 2, if the client were to die at age 69, would be $7 million, again, versus the $10.5 million in the premium finance life insurance policy. If we go out to life expectancy at age 90, if the client were to pass away at age 90, the after estate tax value would be $12.7 million versus almost $20.5 million in the premium financed life insurance death benefit. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, this graph depicts not only the net death benefit in the black bars, as well as the ongoing taxable investment value in the blue bars, but the green bars also show the cash value in the premium finance life insurance policy, and that is the cash value net of loans. Now, most clients are not paying for the interest expense in a premium finance life insurance policy out of their own cash flow. They are typically just reallocating assets from one account, usually an investment portfolio, and they're taking drawdowns from that investment portfolio and repositioning some of those liquid funds into the premium finance life insurance policy in an amount equal to the interest due on the premium financing loan. So we're going to take a look at two different portfolios, one with life insurance and one without life insurance. In the blue column there, that is the after-tax portfolio value with a $10 million starting point. Again, this is after taxes, after fees, after estate taxes, without life insurance. Again, this portfolio is growing at a rate of 5.75% gross minus taxes and fees. In the green column right next to that, that is the exact same portfolio, but the difference is that is the after-tax value after the client takes drawdowns from that portfolio to fund the interest expense in the premium finance life insurance policy. And in the far right-hand green column there, that is the after estate tax portfolio value after we've taken the drawdowns to fund the interest expense in the premium finance life insurance policy, plus the death benefit net of loans. And on the right-hand side of the screen there, we see the green line represent that total portfolio value plus the life insurance death benefit. And the blue line represents the portfolio value without incorporating any life insurance in that portfolio. So you can see by adding premium finance life insurance to a client's overall portfolio, the net amount that would be passed on to generation 2 is substantially higher, not only in the first 10 to 15 years, but all the way through long term as well. Again, if we go to age 90 and policy year 36, the non-insurance investment account in the blue, based on the assumptions that we just discussed, would net generation 2 $18.75 million versus $25.33 million in the portfolio that includes the premium finance life insurance. Now, one of the objections that clients might have is that their expectation of market returns would exceed the 5.75% dividend credit in the policy. So if the market did, say, 7% instead of 5.75% in the taxable non-insurance-based investment account, yet the dividend credit in the premium finance life insurance policy was still set at 5.75%, this is the outcome. Again, the green line represents the portfolio that includes the premium finance life insurance, and the blue line represents the portfolio that does not include any premium finance life insurance. So in this depiction here, the blue asset is growing at a gross annual return of 7%, as is the portfolio inside the green asset, again, both growing at 7%. However, the life insurance dividend that affects the death benefit of the premium finance life insurance policy is still only growing at a rate of 5.75%. But let's say the client objects to this as well, and they think that they're going to get, say, an 8% return in the market, not 7%. Now, in this depiction here, the blue asset is growing at a gross return assumption of 8%, as is the portfolio inside the green asset. However, the life insurance dividend is only still 5.75%. We see here the green asset still outproduces the blue asset all the way up until policy year 35, when the client is 89 years old. At that point, both the blue asset and the green asset have a net value just over $30 million. If we go out to the 40th year, which would put the client at age 94, the blue asset actually has a net value of almost $2 million more than the green asset. However, for the large majority of this 40-year period that we depicted here, the green asset that includes the premium finance life insurance policy inside that portfolio produces a much greater outcome for Generation 2 to net inherit after estate taxes. But this is all under the assumption that the policy is going to receive a 5.75% dividend credit every year, year after year. Now, you could argue that's either overstated or understated. But if we look at the historical arbitrage between the historical borrowing interest rates and the historical dividend credits, in this case with Penn Mutual, it tells a very interesting story here. In the green column there, those are the historical dividend credits that Penn Mutual's whole life policy has enjoyed going all the way back to 1982 through this year, 2023. Now, one of our lenders uses the prime rate minus a spread of 1.5%. And based on that loan's construction, in the blue column there, those would have been the historical borrowing rates using that formula, the prime rate minus 1.5%. We work with about a dozen different lenders. Some of those lenders use a CMT rate plus a spread. Some of them use a SOFR rate plus a spread. In the event that we use a lender that uses the SOFR rate plus a spread, SOFR has only been around for just about a year or so. Prime rate has been around for a long time. So in this back-tested depiction here, we decided to use a lender that uses prime minus 1.5. And in the light green and red column over there, those values depict the historical positive or negative arbitrage between the Penn Mutual dividend credit and the borrowing rates in each one of those back-tested years. As we see here in this historical run here, there are only 6 years wherein the borrowing rate would have been higher than Penn Mutual's dividend credit. Now, over time, if you look at the bottom section of the screen there, the average dividend credit with Penn Mutual during this period of time was 7.38%, whereas the average borrowing rate using this particular lender's borrowing construction would have been 5.10%. Making the average positive arbitrage between Penn Mutual's dividend credit and this particular lender's historical borrowing interest rates 2.28%. Again, 2.28% positive arbitrage over time. So in the depiction that we showed earlier, we assume today's borrowing rate with one of our lenders, and then we use the forward curve rates based on that particular lender's loan construction. The forward curve rates are published quarterly, and the forward curve rates that we used in this particular depiction we looked at in this case study were published on June 30th, 2023. But one of the most important things I think for clients to really understand is that one of the things that makes premium financing work extremely well, extremely efficiently over time is understanding the long-term arbitrage between the crediting rate and the borrowing rate. And as we see here historically, that proposition has worked extremely well. Over on the right-hand side of the screen, during this period of time, again, 1982 through 2023, the green line up top there depicts the historical dividend crediting rate of Penn Mutual, and the blue line represents the historical borrowing rates using one of our lenders' loan construction here. Again, prime minus 1.50%. So again, understanding the long-term relationship between dividend credits, or I should say policy credits, and historical borrowing rates is a very important conversation to have with your client so that they understand what they're really looking at. And then the last thing we'll review on this webinar is how we at Landsmark Capital illustrate our premium financing designs. Sure, you can base assumptions on a decreasing borrowing rate using the forward curve rates. I don't know too many people that believe borrowing rates are going to continue to increase the way they have, but I also believe that you should be very conservative and manage expectations when talking to clients. The last thing I want to do is to overpromise and then underdeliver. So although the forward curve rates are not numbers that we publish, right? These are publicly published numbers. I still want to show the client what this would look like if borrowing rates continued to increase, quite frankly, perpetually increase over time. So our standard way of modeling this is really to show the current borrowing rate today increasing to at least 100 basis points higher than today's borrowing rate by policy year 10. And if we look here in column 5, this is exactly what we're showing. This particular lender that we're using uses the 12-month SOFR rate plus a spread of 1.8%. As of today, that puts the borrowing rate at 7.03%. And then we see there in that box and arrow that just popped up there, we're showing that borrowing rate increasing 100 basis points up to 8.03% by policy year 10. In this depiction, obviously that's going to cost the client a lot more in interest expense out of pocket, which substantially reduces their ROI over time. However, if we take a look at the comparison between this and doing nothing, again, even assuming that higher borrowing interest rate that would trigger a higher or more expensive interest payment each year over time on the right-hand side of the screen, again, the green line depicts the portfolio with those same assumptions on both sides, both in the green asset as well as the blue asset. However, in the green asset, we are drawing down from that portfolio to fund the higher interest payments due in the premium finance life insurance policy. Again, showing the same 5.75% return in both the blue asset as well as the green asset, the net value going to Generation 2 is far greater in the portfolio that utilizes premium finance life insurance than the portfolio that does not. So I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Now, there is one last objection that I didn't cover, and it's a valid one, sort of. Here's what I mean by this. The reality is the client could, in theory, move amounts equal to the premium financing interest payments out of their estate, via gifting these amounts to an irrevocable trust, outside their taxable estate. They could take those funds and invest them in a portfolio owned by this irrevocable trust. Now, if they did this, this investment account would grow outside the client's taxable estate. Now, in the case study that I just showed, the client's non-insurance-based investment account is being taxed at an estate tax rate of 40%. And I can see how someone might say, well, it's really not fair to apply a 40% estate tax hit on the non-insurance-based investment account because the client could just reposition those invested funds outside their taxable estate inside an irrevocable trust and invest them. That's true, they could. But the reality is, one, there is a huge return on investment in the first, call it 10 years or so in a premium finance whole life policy that no investment account is going to yield. I mean, if the client were to die unexpectedly in, say, a car accident or something in year one, their beneficiary would literally get north of a 21,000% net return. If they died in year five, they would get the equivalent of 130% annualized return. And even in year 10, they would get a 35% annual return on investment. So, the reality is, until we brought them the solution of premium finance life insurance, they were likely not going to do any estate tax liquidity planning, and they would have done nothing. Now, maybe they were already in the process of doing some sophisticated estate tax planning, but usually, at least I've found, that when an advisor starts this conversation with their client, most of these clients have not done this type of planning. So, in my opinion, the client can't really say, well, I was going to start moving assets out of my taxable estate, especially if they haven't done it yet. They've had plenty of time to do this. And if they haven't done it yet, they probably were never going to do it. Again, I think it's a fair question to ask them. You've been wealthy for many years, and you haven't implemented any of these solutions in all of these years.
Why are you just thinking about these solutions right now? For 30 years you've been doing it, and now you're just starting to think of solutions.
Well, actually, I have thought about this quite a bit.
Yeah, for 30 years.
I have...
Okay, so whether you like Trump better or Hillary better is not the issue here. I just want to have a little fun here, and I thought this clip was absolutely hilarious. But the point is that most of these clients, as wealthy as they may be, haven't done any real effective estate tax planning for years. And your introduction to premium finance life insurance may be the first time they're really taking a serious look at real solutions to their adult kids' inevitable estate tax bill when they pass away. So, if you or your client prefers the historically less volatile return of whole life dividends, premium financing whole life might be a great solution for them. So, I hope you enjoyed today's webinar. And you can always contact me via our website at lionsmarkcapital.com. Have a great day.